All right, that foreign trip, you never know it, but a lot was done on that foreign trip, the president's first foray abroad, because he got that better than $100 billion Saudi business deal. He was able to get all of these other NATO members to at least think about coughing up more, and at least several are doing that. So he might have publicly embarrassed them. That might have been politically incorrect, but the end result is they're digging into their pockets and being shamed into doing a little bit more. To Bustle, senior political correspondent Erin Delmore, former Bush 41 campaign advisor Mark Serrano. So, Mark, I'm not taking a pro or con position on that, but saying that this trip that has been ripped or questioned, you know, whether the president is shoving his way to the front of a line or being rude or taking a golf cart and not hanging out with the others, it seems to me much ado about nothing, but I think the substance of the trip was just fine. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the media has demonstrated their sort of their bias, their political agenda in the coverage of the trip, Neil. Because, look, he was hugely successful, particularly with the Middle East portion of the trip.
You say hugely better than the president himself. Touche.
I do. Huge.
Excellent. Phenomenal.
Thank you for recognizing that.
That starts a high bar for Erin, and we'll get into that in a second. But go ahead, finish that thought.
Please, hold her to that. So the Middle East portion was so successful, right? And yet, really, I think the mainstream media sort of downplayed the highlights, but they upplayed the lowlights. You know, this supposed tiff with Angela Merkel in Germany is what they're really playing off of. Well, you know what? There's a political belief system that Angela Merkel has with her open borders policies that I think has devastated Europe, that will disable her from ever being able to agree with Donald Trump. So they're going to play that up tremendously. But look, he took it to NATO and said, you folks owe the American people and the taxpayer more.
All right. What do you make, Erin, of the notion that stylistically he kind of rubbed some Europeans, some of his fellow leaders, the wrong way? Does that matter?
I think we saw peaks and valleys in President Trump's presentation abroad. Certainly, he seemed strong in his speech in Saudi Arabia. Once we saw him conversing with some of the G7 leaders, we did see a little bit of rankling of allies' egos, some contentious handshakes, things like that.
Now, by the way, what was that about, especially with Macron? I mean, I was going to show him a thing or two by, I guess, squeezing his hand and breaking it. What was that supposed to mean or do?
So Macron's come out and said that he's looking to stand up to President Trump and be something of an anti-Trump voice in the EU.
That's fine,
so
but how is that point proven by shaking his hand like The Rock? I mean, what is that all about?
Personally, I think all of it is noise. I think the enduring question here is what kind of relationship President Trump forges with our allies and the leaders of our states that we have a more troublesome relationship with. I think a lot of the highlights and the lowlights we saw on the trip, whether it's a handshake, whether it's a small push to the side, is just noise. But the enduring question here is what kind of relationship will President Trump forge?
What kind of relationship should it be, Mark? We do know what we've gotten through Democratic and Republican predecessors alike. Kind of the same old, same old. We have a certain expectation for leaders when they attend these events, and Donald Trump did not fit that mold. But maybe that's not such a bad thing, to be the skunk at that picnic. What do you think?
Well, so what you're talking about is sort of the natural friction among allies, which hasn't really existed for a very long time because we've just gone along to get along. Donald Trump instead
and by the way, I should stress, we focus on our differences behind closed doors. We make our treaties known behind closed doors, and they ignore us.
Right, and exactly. And they ignore us, and we get nothing out of it. Look, the reality is that these European allies have relied upon America, the American taxpayer, for decades to stand between them and devastation from the Soviet Union during the Cold War and from the threat of Russia. And that still stands today. The American military is the only thing that stands between them and the threat because they can't defend themselves on their own. And so he's saying to them, look at Germany alone is paying a third in defense that the United States is paying. And he's going to hold them accountable openly, outwardly. And if they get their feathers ruffled, if they clutch their pearls, well, so what? That's Donald Trump. Deal with it.
What did you make? That was one of the more iconic images from the whole visit, I think. And I don't think in a bad way for the president in that some of those leaders were snickering, outright laughing when he was saying that. I don't think aware that they were caught on camera doing so, as he was bemoaning, you know, they're not coughing up more at NATO. But his message was clear. I mean, I keep telling you guys, and 3 of my predecessors have told you guys, this has got to stop, and you don't stop it. So you know what? I'm going to do it at this event. What did you think of the tact he took there?
President Trump absolutely held European leaders' feet to the fire, and I could see American taxpayers cheering that statement. But the question now is, with the approval rating hovering around 40%, is President Trump looking to appeal to his base, or is he looking to broaden his coalition and broaden his support at home? The real question over whether this trip was a success or a failure or anything in between comes from the value you see in diplomacy. Was President Trump's job to talk to leaders and to try to build relationships and get them on the side of America, get them to negotiate for American interests abroad, or was it to stand up for America first, as he said in his campaign speech, or was there room for both?
But those are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Those are not mutually exclusive concepts. Look, the reality is Europe has got to get their act together. They need to follow Donald Trump's lead and get out of the way, because he's going to demonstrate an entirely different approach to the world order, to the Middle East, where he demonstrated he can cut deals to get the Middle East to finally fight this fight against terrorism. And now he's going to do the same thing with Europe. So this diplomacy is not what Donald Trump is about. He's about cutting good deals for the American taxpayer.
Yeah,
right, but at the same time, alliances aren't something we forge for our allies' sake. The U.S. has a stake in this as well. In the months after 9/11, America worked with more than 100 other countries on intelligence sharing.
Right, but they're taking advantage of us. They treat us like punks. And by not investing in their own defense, and those days are over.
That's the line President Trump needs to walk to negotiate for America's economic interests and national security.
He's going to blow right past that line.
I'm snickering at both of you. How's that? Guys, seriously, thank you both very, very much.